So UFC 281 is upon us, and you know what that means, boys. It means it's Dan Hooker fight week. Let's go. I'm from New Zealand. He's one of my favourite fighters. I've been a massive fan of Dan Hooker since I saw him knock out Ross Pearson live in Auckland. I was there live for that event. Super hyped up for Dan Hooker's fights, and I understand he's not on a good run recently, but I do feel like this might be a fight where he can get back on the winning ways. I wish he never cut down to 145. I feel like that was just a really bad idea. My Google Chrome's decided to crash right in the intro. I kind of love that from my laptop. But yeah, I've got a little meme to show you guys if it's going to load. So the jaw surgery is done, your credit card declines, and the doctor, he's got to reverse the damage, you know what I mean, reverse the fix. And a little bit of a meme that me and Dan Hooker share, you know what I mean. Like, I've got a pretty massive jaw surgery myself, multiple actually, if you didn't know. I've got a scar that runs from the front of my chin all the way to the back of my ear. Because I've made my camera a lot bigger, you might actually be able to see it now. But yeah, don't look too closely, because I'm not as good looking as Carlos Ulberg, you know what I mean? Like, I've got to talk up a fellow king. I think Carlos Ulberg's a pretty good looking bloke. There's nothing too personal. It's just got a king hyping up another king. You got to do that sometimes, boys, because who else is going to hype you up? So yeah, I'm going to be going with Nikolai Negumereanu in the fight, unfortunately, though. This guy is a wrestler, you know what I mean? And he does have a wrestling base, and he does have a pretty good wrestling background that he doesn't tend to use. So I'm going to trust that he's going to use that wrestling in this matchup, but if he doesn't, I think he's going to get picked apart and beaten by Carlos Ulberg. But one thing I'm going to say, though, Nikolai Negumereanu's record before the UFC is very padded. Like, he didn't fight anyone with a winning record, apart from, like, 2 guys, before he got into the UFC. And since then, he's been on a really good run, though. Like, he's making things happen. He's got a split decision win over Kmart, split decision win over Wuku. I picked him to beat Kennedy, and I picked him to beat Pereira there as well. And I think he's going to be able to beat beat Ulberg. Like, Nikolai Negumereanu, if he looks to use the wrestling, I think he should be able to beat a guy like Carlos Ulberg here, who hasn't been tested with his wrestling in the UFC, you know what I mean? Fabio Charant struck with him, Tafon Nchukwi struck with him and got knocked out. I mean, he gassed out against Kenichi Njokuku after having maybe the craziest round of all time in the light heavyweight division. I think that's definitely not up to debate. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, there probably is stuff in the past, but that is the most crazy modern light heavyweight round we've ever seen, in my opinion anyway. But I think Negumereanu, if he looks to use the wrestling, I think he can win. But if Ulberg can keep it on the feet, which we haven't seen him do yet, we haven't seen him try to be taken down, which is a red flag to me. I think if Negumereanu looks to use his wrestling, he can get the win. So I'm going to trust Negumereanu to use the wrestling, but if not, I think Ulberg is the much better striker. I think that's pretty obvious. And I'm going with the underdog. Negumereanu is a slight underdog here. Maybe it's a little bit of hype on the Ulberg side. I'm from New Zealand, man. Normally I have a little bit of a bias to the Kiwi fighters, and I will admit I kind of do. But I feel like this is a matchup where I can just justify Negumereanu winning a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more evidence to prove that he can beat Ulberg than Ulberg can beat Negumereanu, because Negumereanu is a wrestler, he does have a wrestling base, and Ulberg, you know what I mean? I don't think anyone's tried to take him down in the UFC, so we'll see how that goes. Julio Arce taking on Montel Jackson. I'm going with Montel Jackson, but I don't like the odds. I had a quick check at the odds before this matchup, and Montel Jackson's like minus 200, almost minus 225 on some books as well, which in my opinion is way too wide for this matchup here, but I'm still going to side with him to win the fight. I don't pick fighters based on odds whatsoever. I pick who I think is going to win, and I do think Montel Jackson's going to win. He's taken a year off, which is a little bit interesting considering he's in his prime right now, but maybe he was injured or maybe something happened, but I'm going to trust that he's made improvements since then. And Julio Arce is a pretty gritty veteran, man. This guy's good, and he got a very good win over Daniel Santos as well only 6 months ago, because Daniel Santos recently beat John Castaneda, who I would say is a very good fighter himself. So that win over Daniel Santos has aged pretty well, in my opinion. He lost to Song Yadong, who's a ranked fighter right now. Lost to Hakeem Dawodu, who's now at 145, doing pretty big things. Andre Ewell win doesn't mean too much, in my opinion. And then Julian Erosa win has aged pretty well as well. Like, Arce's definitely got that dog in him. I think he's a gritty veteran. I wouldn't be surprised if I see people picking Julio Arce. I think he's a very good live underdog. But I like Montel Jackson. He's a very fan-friendly fighter. He's very exciting. I'm not going to go with him by KO. I'm going to go with him to win by decision, which might be a little bit of a interesting one. He couldn't finish JP Bays, who took him up on short notice, but he looked pretty dominant in that matchup. I think Jackson should win, but I would not be surprised if Arce can pull something off as an underdog. And then we move on, Mike Trizano versus Sungwoo Choi, and I was really thinking about picking Mike Trizano, and I still might, because in 48 hours I will give my full breakdown of this matchup. But for now, in my first look, I'm going to go with Sungwoo Choi. I'm not ready to give up on Sungwoo Choi yet, you know what I mean? Like, the two guys he lost to are Alex Caceres, in like a weird fight where Sungwoo Choi, I believe he was winning the fight, and then there was like an illegal strike at some point, and then Caceres ended up winning after that, and then he lost a split decision to Joshua Culibao. In my opinion, Culibao did win the matchup though, and I think I picked Sungwoo Choi in that fight as well, but I do think Culibao won the fight. But this guy's good, you know what I mean? He's got good KO power, he's a very good kickboxer, he's huge for 145, so is Trizano, to be fair. He's 5'11" on paper, Sungwoo Choi 6 foot on paper, so pretty similar in size. And Trizano, the guys that he's losing to are elite. Almeida, Dawadu, and Dawson, you know what I mean? Like, they are pretty elite losses to have. But I like Sungwoo Choi. I think that he should be able to win this fight on the feet if it stays on the feet. And I just kind of like the kickboxing base. I like his size, and I like the fact that potentially he's going to look for a quick turnaround as well after this in the South Korea card. I believe it's in February. So, I mean, that doesn't make a pick, change my pick, but I still think that Choi should win the matchup. And I think he's going to fight in February on the South Korea card, because there's not that many South Korean fighters, you know what I mean? Now, Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Silvana Gomez Juarez. I'm gonna go with Silvana Gomez Juarez. Both of these girls are very old for strawweight, you know what I mean? Like Carolina, she's 37 years old. She got cut from the UFC and then cried about it, so they re-signed her. And same sort of thing with Felice Herrig. Felice Herrig also got cut from the UFC, had a cry. The UFC, for some reason, felt bad for them, signed them both to fight each other. Made no sense. But that's literally what happened. And then Kowalkiewicz beat Felice Herrig. But I think she's going to get knocked out by Silvana Gomez Juarez. I've never seen this level of power from an old woman's strawweight. It's kind of crazy. She knocked out Nali Young. I thought Nali Young was going to win that fight by armbar. She knocked down Vanessa Demopoulos and then got submitted by armbar. And it's a pretty bad knockdown as well. And, you know, I think she fought Lupita Godinez on short notice. Like, this girl's got some crazy power in her hands. She's getting crazy KOs. I think if Karolina Kowalkiewicz decides to strike with her, which I think is what's going to happen, I think at this point in both of their careers, Silvana Gomez Juarez is pretty likely to get a KO. So I'm actually picking Juarez to get a KO, which is crazy, I know. She's a very slight underdog on some pages here, so I think I will just kind of say it's a pick-em fight either way. Kowalkiewicz could win the fight, but they're both pretty old. I feel like Suarez just is more likely to get a finish. Actually, one thing I will say though is Juarez has no ground game whatsoever. So if Karolina Kowalkiewicz takes her down, I would not be surprised whatsoever if she gets a submission. So do not play this fight. This is a very scary fight to play. And we move on. I'm going to be taking an underdog in this matchup here. Otman Azaita. I could not believe it when I saw the Otman Azaita, the potato man himself. If you don't know that situation, I will explain it to you very quickly. So you know how the UFC was in Abu Dhabi? Otman Azaita had someone scaling the walls of the hotel. Like, he was on some like Spider-Man stuff, scaling the walls to kind of sneak in a bag into Otman Azaita's room, and they claimed it was potatoes. But if it was potatoes, I don't really understand why they couldn't just like walk into the hotel with potatoes, you know what I mean? So we're calling the Potato Man Otman Azaita. It obviously wasn't potatoes, by the way, but they never said what it was, and he got banned for a very long time, and he hasn't fought for 2 years now. And they were actually going to do Azaita versus Paddy Pimblett, I think, but I think they kind of picked against that because it might not have been the best idea. He hasn't fought for 2 years though. Maybe that was how long the suspension was. Maybe it was like 18 months or 1 year or something like that. And yeah, Matt Frivola. I do worry about that one. I know it doesn't make sense. We got KO'd one time by Terence McKinney. I do worry about that. I know it doesn't make sense. And then he kind of dominated Gennaro Vardias. So I guess in hindsight, like maybe Matt Frivola could be a really good pick. But I'm going to go with the Zaita here. I'm going with the Potato Man. I wonder what the Tapology explanation for this cancelled fight is. Because it happened about a year and a half ago. Let's not try not to burn... Oh, there we go. Azaita violated COVID-19 protocols. That's what happened. So, Azaita's had a teammate sneaking into the hotel with a bag of potatoes. But I know that, I've lost my best fight odds page, what an idiot. But I know that Azaita's like plus 125 right now. I'm going with that, man. I'm believing in it, which is kind of crazy. Doesn't make a lot of sense, I know. That's what I'm going with. Let's try and find this UFC again. Here it is. Matt Frivola, minus 125. Azaita, plus 118, plus 105. I just believe in the Zaita. It's got so many KOs. I think it should get a KO. This one here. And now, guys, this might be like my most controversial pick. Maybe a really bad pick, but I'm picking Wellington Turman to defeat Andre Petroski. And in hindsight, Andre Petroski's had a really easy run in the UFC, you know what I mean? He lost to Aaron Jeffrey on the regional scene, who actually lost on Dana White's Contender Series after that. He beat Michael Gilmore after the Ultimate Fighter, so he got signed to the UFC off a loss, by the way. To a guy that lost in Dana White's Contender Series as well, which in hindsight wasn't a bad loss because Jeffrey is probably about to fight for a title in Bellator, but doesn't matter. Beat Michael Gilmore, who was a 6-3 short notice opponent. Beat Yao Zhonghu, who was 3-2 at the time. And then he beat Nick Maximov, which is a really good win. I know Nick Maximov has been cut. I don't know why, because I think Maximov's actually a very good fighter. But that was a very good win by him. But I'm going to go with Wellington Turman. No chin Turman. Believe it or not, this guy gets KO'd all the time. He's got no chin whatsoever. It's pretty scary. I don't think Petrosky's going to be able to knock out Wellington Turman. I think Turman's jiu-jitsu is actually going to be good enough to lock up a sub against Petrosky. Turman, I feel like, is a very underrated fighter. He has no chin whatsoever. He's a very hard fighter to trust, which is why he probably is a massive underdog right now. What are the odds? He is only plus 186. Man, I thought he was going to be a much bigger underdog than that. But, yeah, so we recently beat Sam... Oh, no, I forgot about that. He beat Sam Alvey after having 2 points deducted, which was crazy. He beat Musha Serkinov by submission, but, like, this guy's okay, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like people are going to hate on this pick a little bit, but I'm going to go with Turman by submission. I don't believe in the hype of Petrosky. I don't believe he's that good, and I feel like the UFC's trying to build him up into some guy to get hyped up behind, even though he's, like, almost 32 years old. Like, if you're going to invest into something, invest in someone that's not going to retire in 3 years, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm going with Turman. I think he should be able to win the matchup. Now, Erin Blanchfield taking on Molly McCann. I feel like in about 7 days from now, a lot of people are going to know who Erin Blanchfield is. I feel like this is a setup fight to make Erin Blanchfield a prospect. They're building up a prospect that isn't 34, 35 years old like they normally do, which makes no sense. Like what Bellator does. It makes no sense to me. Erin Blanchfield's like, well, not even 24 years old. She's crazy good. And she's someone that I think a lot of people should be able to get behind because she is so good. You know, she submitted JJ Aldrich, she beat Miranda Maverick, she dominated Miranda Maverick, beat Sarah Alpar, beat Brogan Walker, who's the Ultimate Fighter finalist. I think she might still be signed to the UFC even though she lost. Beat Victoria Leonardo by head kickers in the UFC. Molly McCann, you know, she's on a crazy win streak. She knocked out Hannah Goldie, knocked out Luana Carolina, and she beat Ji-Yeon Kim. But Erin Blanchfield's got that wrestling, man. I think she's going to out-wrestle Molly McCann. I think people are really going to find out who Erin Blanchfield is. I think this is I think she's just going to win. I think she's just going to be able to beat Molly McCann. I think she's going to win a decision, maybe even a late submission if McCann can't really sort things out. But I think if Blanchfield leans on the wrestling, I think she really should be able to win the fight. And she's minus 400 for a reason, you know what I mean? I did actually expect those odds. She's good. Erin Blanchfield is very good. And potential future champion, and probably is because she's so young. She's 24 years old, got plenty of time to develop. Now Dominic Gray is taking on Ryan Spann. Ryan Spann's always been a guy that I've had a pretty bad read on. He's kind of a kill or be killed fighter. Dominic Gray is, I mean, I'm just gonna say it, boys. Dominic Gray has beat John Jones. He just did. Watch the fight. He won 3 rounds. John Jones took over towards the end. But Ray has won 3 rounds. That was a bad decision. In fact, it was probably one of the worst decisions. And then he took on Jan Blachowicz, knocked him out, who ended up being a champion, by the way. Yuri Prochazka, he fought Yuri Prochazka, who ended up knocking him out. And he had success in that fight. And you know what happened? Yuri Prochazka went on to be a champion. Dominic Gray is an elite fighter. He's just losing to guys that are so good. And losing to John Jones, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of insane to me. That, yeah, I think Reyes wins this fight. Ryan Spann's pretty well rounded. He does have submissions in his game. He beat Ion Kutalaba, which is insane. I thought Ion Kutalaba was going to beat him. He lost to Anthony Smith. Beat Misha Serkinov. You know, like he's beating and losing to guys that they're quite inconsistent. I think that Dominic Reyes is just that level, man. I think Dominic Reyes should be able to beat Ryan Spann in this matchup. I'm going to go with Reyes KO. Reyes is good. If he gets knocked out, I'm going to be a little bit worried about picking him in the future. But for now, I've got to go with Dominic Reyes. This guy's pretty decent fighter. The guys he's losing to as well. And he's just got a really good kickboxing base. His grappling ain't too bad as well. But he's mainly a kickboxer for sure. Minus 230 for Reyes. I feel like the line is just respecting him. Like I'm respecting him now. How many fights are on this card? 14. Interesting. I like seeing 14 fights on a pay-per-view. Makes me happy. Makes me smile. A guy that I've become a very big fan of recently is Renato Big Money Moicano. I can't believe how old this guy is though. He's almost 34 years old, which is insane. But he wants the big money fights, and I feel like Brad Riddell, low-key, like I know he's not a big name, but he kind of is a big money fight in a way, you know what I mean? Like, Renato Moicano, he stepped on like 5 days notice against Rafael dos Anjos, got obliterated, took a bit of time off, and now he's fighting Brad Riddell. Beat Alexander Hernandez, and when he did that, he said, I want the big money fights, Renato Big Money Moicano. which I love, you know what I mean? But I think that this is a good fight for Brad Riddell to get back in the winning streak. I think he's the much better striker. I think his fight against Rafael Fiziev, up until the spinning wheel kick, is actually one of the highest level striking matchups you're going to see. You know, in the UFC, it's actually crazy. Like, I guess Piotr Jan versus Corey Sandhagen is up there too. But the level of skill in the striking between Fiziev and Brad Riddell is actually very, very good to watch. It's quite crazy. And then he got smoked by Jalen Turner pretty quickly. Jalen Turner hurt him. And then something that Brad Riddell tends to do is look for a takedown when he gets hurt. And Jalen Turner ended up guillotining him. So good for Jalen Turner, you know what I mean? But Brad Riddell, I think he's the much better striker out of the two. And when Moicano does have good submissions, most of his wins actually do come by submission. But I think that Brad Riddell is going to be too smart. I think he's going to have good takedown defense if it gets to that point. I think he's going to keep the fight on the feet, win the fight on the feet. And because Moicano's taken so much damage by Rafael Adesanya, I'm actually going to pick Riddell by KO. His matchup here. Interesting, so many people on Moicano. I guess that are sleeping on my boy Riddell, who's actually an underdog. I like that underdog pick. I'm picking a few underdogs on this card. I really like Brad Riddell as an underdog on the spot. We move on to the main card. Boys. It's Dan Hooker fight week. I'm picking Dan Hooker to win the fight. Surely he's a favourite in this fight, right? He is. He's minus 170 to minus 180 even. And I think that's pretty warranted. I have no idea why he tried to cut down to 145. In my opinion, I think that was a really bad career move. He should have either stuck to 155 or even bulked up to 170. Could have potentially made sense. But he's on a bad run right now, you know what I mean? He lost to Dustin Poirier. That fight changed his career. He fought Michael Chandler, got knocked out in the first round, stepped around, fought Nasrat Haqparast, and then he fought Islam Makhachev on pretty short notice. And then he went down to 145. Like, it's kind of crazy what Dan Hooker's been doing. And I know Claudio Puelles on a pretty good win streak, but the thing about Claudio Puelles is, man, like, he hasn't looked super impressive until he beat Clay Guida. Like, he's having a competitive fight with Chris Gruschmacher. Well, Jordan Levitt win's pretty good, I know. Marcos Mariano win doesn't really mean anything. I think he was the Ultimate Fighter guy from years ago. And, yeah, I just think Dan Hooker's better. I think he's much better on the feet. I think he's going to be able to defend any takedowns that Claudio Puelles tries to go for. And I think he should be able to win the matchup on the feet. If he's smart, he won't look to use his own wrestling. I think he should keep the fight on the feet for the whole time. Dan Hooker's due for a KO, is one thing I'm also going to say. Dan Hooker hasn't knocked anyone out in a very long time. Do I think that Claudio Puelles can get knocked out? Yeah, because his striking defense ain't that great. He hasn't knocked anyone out since he knocked out James Vick, which isn't a good look. But he knocked out Gilbert Burns. He knocked out Jim Miller with a pretty great knee, to be fair. He went on a really good run after that Ross Pearson fight, to be fair. And then he fought Edson Barboza, who dominated him, and even beat Ray Janelle La Quinta. In my opinion, he did beat Paul Felder, by the way. I thought he won 3 rounds. Is what it is. But, yeah, Dan Hooker. Let's go, boys. Dan Hooker. I'm picking Dan Hooker, by the way. I'm picking him by KO or decision. If he submits Claudio Puelles, I'll be very surprised. Claudio Puelles is going to look for knee bars. It's kind of what he does. He's on a 2-fight knee bar streak, which is scary, but I think Dan Hooker's going to be smart to that, you know what I mean? I think he's going to be able to defend that. So give me Dan Hooker to win by decision or KO. Interesting, people are fading my boy Danny. He is not the same fighter he was, I completely agree, but he's not washed up as bad as Tony Ferguson is, and I actually feel like if Dan Hooker wins this fight, I think he might call out Tony Ferguson, which kind of makes sense, kind of doesn't, but I think it still makes sense. We move on to Frankie Edgar taking on Chris Gutierrez. In my opinion, they could have found a better fight for Frankie Edgar. Is Uriah Faber still in the USADA testing? You know, maybe they could have done Frankie Edgar versus Uriah Faber, or even they could have delayed Cub Swanson's first fight at 135, that Edgar versus Swanson. They've probably fought each other before. That I've forgotten about, but like maybe that could have made sense. Like, I feel like Edgar versus a veteran would have been a much smarter retirement fight instead of fighting a hungry up-and-comer who, once again, is too old to be labelled a prospect in Chris Gutierrez. If he wants to make something happen, he needs to make it happen right now, and beating Frankie Edgar is definitely one way to do that. But, boys, I'm going to do it, man. I'm going to do it. I'm picking Frankie Edgar to win this fight. I think it's a very winnable fight for Frankie Edgar. Right here, he's a massive underdog. He's plus 180. Interesting. I feel like people just don't believe in Edgar anymore. This guy got knocked out by Marlon Vera, Corey Sandhagen, Chan Sung Jung, and Max Holloway. He lost to Max Holloway by decision. Of course he did, because Max Holloway can't knock anyone out. But Like those guys that he's losing to are legit, and Pedro Munoz, and you could even make the argument that he was beating Chito Vera as well. Before that KO in the third round. Like, Frankie Edgar's a good fighter still, man. I think he's still got it in him to get one more win. I think he's going to use that wrestling. I think he's going to take down Chris Gutierrez. And it's going to be... Well, I'm holding up my Dan Hooker t-shirt. It's not even Dan Hooker fight week right now. Well, it is, but it's not Dan Hooker fight breakdown right now. I'm going to be picking Frankie Edgar to win this matchup by decision. And I just feel like he should be able to beat Chris Gutierrez. Like, Chris Gutierrez recently beat Dinar Bakare by KO, which I guess is actually a really good look. But before that, you know what I mean? Like, this is a winnable fight for Frankie. Like, we're talking a guy that was 1-1, potentially 2-0 against Marlon Vera going into the third round in a 3-round fight. I think Frankie Edgar can use the wrestling and beat Chris Gutierrez like that, man. I believe it. We move on. This is a good fight. This is a very, very good fight. Dustin Poirier taking on Michael Chandler. Part of me wanting to pick Michael Chandler, but I can't do it. I do think that Dustin Poirier is just a little bit better than him. I think he's just a little bit better when it comes down to it. I think he's a little bit of a better striker. And what are the odds for this matchup? Because I can't actually see them. They're not on here. That is really weird. They're not on best fight odds that I can see. Unless I'm really stupid, they're not on best fight odds, which is strange. This is strange, so I'm going to waste a little bit of time here. And let's look at fight odds. Oh, I guess we could look at best fight odds again. Have they figured it out? Michael Chandler, I guess at the moment he's minus 200. Is Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler's plus 170. I'm just going to go off that. I do think that Dustin Poirier is going to win the fight. I think he's just a little bit of a more technical striker. Michael Chandler did get dropped by Tony Ferguson 5 months ago, which isn't a very good look. Right now, he had a war with Justin Gaethje, and he could have beaten Justin Gaethje as well if he was just smarter in that third round, but he wasn't. This guy's an entertainer. You know, he's a fighter, but he's also an entertainer. You know what I mean? He knocked out Dan Hooker when he fought Justin Gaethje. He really could have won that third round if he put it all into it, but he was just kind of like hyping up the crowd and losing when he could have probably turned it around. I'm going to be going with Dustin Poirier to win this matchup here. He lost to Charles Oliveira, no shame in that. You know what I mean? One of the greatest lightweights of all time. Beat Conor McGregor twice, Dan Hooker. Damn. And lost to Khabib. You know, like, these things happen. I think Dustin Poirier should win the matchup here. And by KO is interesting. I'm going to go with decision. I mean, Justin Gaethje took Chandler to a decision. I'm going to go Poirier taking him to decision as well. Should be good as well. Both of them have good wrestling as well if they want to use it. Carlo Esparza taking on Zhang Weili. I think Zhang Weili's like a huge favourite in this matchup here. Once again, I'm going to have to go to Google because I can't find the odds on best fight odds, which is a little bit disappointing. Zhang Weili is minus 385 right now. I think people just don't trust Esparza like whatsoever after that last fight. I trust Weili Zhang. Her wrestling's looking really good as well. And I'm not going to say that Weili Zhang's going to go out there and out-wrestle Carlo Esparza, but I think if it comes down to it and Esparza's desperately looking for takedowns after getting absolutely demolished on the feet, I think Weili Zhang's got the wrestling to kind of at least nullify those attempts and even defend the takedowns and keep the fight on the feet and at range where she wants it. I think Weili Zhang knocks out Carlo Esparza, and I'm going to say she does it within 2 rounds. I just feel like Carlo Esparza, her striking's not that great. Like, I know that she beat Rose Namajunas. I mean, like, the thing is, like, did she? But at the same time, no one deserved... The fans... UFC YouTube channel posted that fight as to hype up her fight with Zhang Weili. That is the worst fight of all time. The worst fight of all time. And after watching it, why would I trust Carla Esparza to beat Zhang Weili? I have no reason to. She did nothing against Rose Namajunas. It's actually getting me angry now. That fight was so terrible. Zhang Weili, she beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk quite dominantly as well. I think she's going to absolutely destroy Carla Esparza. I think she's going to knock her out in 2 rounds, within 2 rounds. Carla Esparza's going to have nothing for her. I'm going to say that. I'm going to kind of throw that bold statement out there. Esparza's just holding on to Weili's belt right now, let's be honest. Weili Zhang, she's very, very good fighter. Israel Adesanya taking on Alex Pereira, and I'm picking Alex Pereira in the big matchup here, and it really comes down to... Hold on, I forgot. Adesanya's grown a boob. This could change the pick. Pereira's an underdog as well, which does make a lot of sense, let's be honest, but where is it? Dan Hangman, where is it? Where's the post? Yeah, Izzy's growing a boob. Look at this. Look right there where my mouse is. The gyno's back. The gyno's back, which is crazy. But also, that's another thing. How did he make 145? The gyno's back right there on his right side, on our left side. It's right there. Maybe it changes the pick. It won't change the pick, sorry. But maybe it changes the fight. It makes the fight a little bit more interesting. That's for sure. But I'm picking Alex Pereira to win this matchup here. And I think he's going to do it by KO again. Like, here's the difference between these two fighters. Israel Adesanya, when he fights, Adesanya's got a crazy fan base as well. So I feel like I'm going to get a little bit of hate on this video, which is kind of insane. First thing I'm going to say, Adesanya is probably the cringiest fighter on the UFC roster right now, which is going to get so much hate. But the next thing I'm going to say is, when Adesanya was getting asked about the Pereira fight in the press conference against Jared Cannonier, he was getting super defensive. Like, he was riling up. It was freaking him out. Yeah, and he was saying stuff like, I could do your job, you could never do mine. So, the thing is, though, like, I looked into these fights. I looked into Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, and I watched a whole documentary on Alex Pereira's life. This is going to take a while, by the way. Alex Pereira is a former drug addict. He was addicted to alcohol. This guy left school when he's like 12 years old to work at a tire shop, like this sort of thing. Like, this guy, when he fought Israel Adesanya for the first time, he was a drug addict. He was an alcohol addict. Like, his life was completely different to what it is right now. I believe he is. I'm not going to say this for a fact, but I believe Alex Pereira is Muslim now. Like, he's really changed his life. He's drug free. He's alcohol free. And in the second fight, by the way, when he fought Israel Adesanya and knocked him out, he took that fight on 1 week notice. Like, I did do my job as Israel Adesanya. I looked into these fights. I looked into Alex Pereira's life. His life is a lot different now. He's been training for MMA for a few years. He's a very good striker, very good kickboxer. So is Israel Adesanya. But their fight styles are completely different. Adesanya fights to not lose. He fights from the outside. I know it's a meme, but he does leg kick at range. He jabs at range. And he just keeps his opponent at bay. And they just freeze in front of him, which makes no sense. Like, Jared Cannonier just froze in front of him, which makes no sense. Robert Whittaker arguably beat him. I do think that Israel Adesanya did win that matchup, by the way, but I think that Rob Whittaker would win a third fight. I'm just going to say it. But he beat Marvin Tori, obviously. Lost to Jan, pretty clearly, but that's what it is. And he beat Paulo Costa by KO. Last time he had the gyno, by the way. But another thing about Alex Pereira is he's tall. In fact, he's probably I think he's taller than Israel Adesanya, by the way, guys. Adesanya is not 6'4". I refuse to believe it. Israel Adesanya and Francis Ngannou are both listed at 6'4" on Tapology. And Israel Adesanya is shorter than Francis Ngannou. It's quite significant. So, yeah, that's a little interesting fact there. I think Pereira is going to be taller than him. They've got a very similar reach. The same reach, actually, 80 inches. And another thing that I'm going to say about this matchup as well is Israel Adesanya hasn't fought a tall fighter, and he hasn't fought a rangy fighter either. Jared Cannonier, I believe, is like 5'11", with a somewhat short range. Robert Whittaker, I believe, is like 6 foot tall. I believe Marvin Tori is also 6 foot tall. Like, the guys that he's fighting aren't as tall as Alex Pereira. They're not as lengthy as Alex Pereira. And another thing is, the mental game for Israel Adesanya in this fight is going to be insane. Adesanya is not going to look to take down Alex Pereira at all, because as soon as he does that, he's lost it. You know what I mean? He's admitted to himself that he can't strike with Alex Pereira. I don't believe that someone like Israel Adesanya is going to do that. And another thing is, when I was mentioning up earlier, when the media were asking Izzy about the Pereira fight, and he wasn't even fighting Izzy, he was fighting Jared Cannonier, he was freaking out. Like, he was freaking out. And now he's going to be fighting Pereira. Pereira's going to be across from him. He won't be talking because he actually does. He's going to, and Israel Adesanya's going to be freaking out, like, do your job. You didn't watch the fight. I won the first fight. This and that, like, you know. But it is what it is. And then Alex Pereira's just going to be like, oh yeah, I respect for Izzy. Even in the Cannonier build up, he was like, let's all cheer for Izzy. Like, let's get let's go Izzy. You know what I mean? And now, like, Alex Pereira is just going to be like stone cold, and it's like, oh, like, those fights don't really affect me. They're in the past. I don't hear them now. Like, it's such a crazy storyline. He beat him twice in kickboxing. Adesanya all of a sudden starts having success in MMA. Alex Pereira starts fighting in MMA, gets signed to the UFC, wins 3 fights in a year, jumps up. He was unranked after beating Bruno Silva, which I guess is a red flag because Bruno Silva recently lost to GM3, but different fight, and Bruno Silva is actually a very good kickboxer himself. And then knocked out Sean Strickland pretty quickly. And then Like, now he's fighting his right side, here to take his belt and take everything he's worked for. Like, this is such a savage storyline. Like, Pereira is just like that boogeyman that just haunts his right Adesanya. Like, imagine if Adesanya loses this fight and he goes to, like, boxing and, like, builds on his boxing record, because I believe he's 5-1 or 5-0 as a pro boxer or something like that, and builds on that, and then Pereira just starts boxing again. And then they box for like some sort of Australasian title or something absolutely insane like that. Like, you know, you can just see it happening. It's either Adesanya decision or Pereira KO. I don't think Adesanya's going to get a KO. This guy's been promising getting KOs for 2 years now, since he fought Paulo Costa. I don't trust him to get a KO over Pereira. I think Pereira's going to knock him out, and he's the underdog as well. I'm going for Pereira. I think it comes down to that mental game. I think that's a big one. And I don't think Adesanya's going to shoot for takedowns, which I guess you could argue we could do, because he does have a purple belt in BJJ, I believe. Pereira might have pretty good grappling training with Glover Teixeira himself, to be fair, but I don't think either of these two are going to shoot for takedowns. And even if one does, I wouldn't be that surprised if it's Alex Pereira, because I just do not believe that Israel Adesanya's going to shoot for a takedown. You know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds weird to say, but I don't think either of these guys are going to shoot for a takedown. So that's kind of the breakdown. It's half an hour. I'm really sorry it was a very long one, but I'm so hyped for this card. It's going to be so good. Very, very excited. A New Zealand fan, it's going to be brilliant. It's going to be fantastic. Hopefully all of the Kiwis win. I'm not picking all of them to win, but it's just part of the game, man. You know what I mean? Like, you don't see every American YouTuber picking all of the American fighters to win. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just got to pick against your own country, and it's hard to do, but sometimes you got to do it. And I'm doing it against Nagumurano and Olberg. Just tough one. Yeah, let's have a look. See. Hold on. What? This guy commented Hooker versus Puelles. Don't know either. You don't know Dan Hooker? I'm sorry, but Dan Hooker's a household name in MMA. Like, Dan Hooker's, like, as a massive Dan Hooker fan, I'm going to defend him here. Dan Hooker's a huge name. This guy fought Dustin Poirier in a fight night main event, and Dustin Poirier's a massive name. And then he fought Michael Chandler in his debut, and then he fought Islam Makhachev on short notice, and everyone loved him for it. Like, what? This is insanity. Not the James Vick fight, the Dustin Poirier fight. This was UFC Fight Night, and I believe during what is going on? That's insane. Anyway, wow, I can't believe it that people that don't know that Dan Hooker are on Tapology. That just amazes me. Wow. Anyway, that's my breakdown. I'll see you in the next one.